I want to talk to you today about an issue that may seem a bit esoteric, and that is the question of the unitary executive and the president's right to fire any federal official he wants. This has been a central theme in the Trump administration's consolidation of power since January 20th, his assertion of his right to remove all federal officials without giving reasons. This happened recently when he forced out Eric Siebert, who was a professional prosecutor in the Justice Department. He did this because Siebert refused or said that he didn't believe that there was enough evidence to indict James Comey, the former FBI director who had crossed Trump, and Trump replaced him with another much more compliant prosecutor that brought those charges. This is not the only federal official he's tried to remove. He is trying to get rid of Lisa Cook, one of the Federal Reserve Board's Board of Governors. He's fired a whole number of inspector generals in different federal agencies. He's fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because he didn't like the employment numbers that the Bureau was producing, and other members of multi-member commissions, the MSPB, the FTC, and many others. Now, the reason that this is legally questionable is that most of these officials, not the federal prosecutors, but the members of these other agencies, like members of the Federal Reserve, are supposedly protected by what are called for-cause protections, meaning that you have to give a reason for firing them. They have to have committed some offense that justifies their firing, and they can contest that through some kind of a process. Trump has simply removed them without giving reason and doing it without the kind of waiting period that the law requires. Now, the lower courts have blocked many of these removals, but the Supreme Court and its current conservative majority is very sympathetic to expanding Trump's power under the unitary executive doctrine. The unitary executive is an interpretation of the Constitution that has been popular among conservatives for quite a number of years. This predates Donald Trump, but they're now getting an opportunity to put this into precedent and into American law. Now, there are a number of reasons for supporting a unitary executive, and not all of them are terrible. One argument is an originalist one that says that the reading of the constitutional arguments before the ratification of the Constitution and the Constitution itself says that the president's power should be plenary, that is to say, really undiluted by any of the other branches, powers of the other branches. There's another practical argument that says that the executive branch and the president personally needs undivided authority. If you have different voices speaking from the executive branch on policy issues that disagree with one another, this could be disastrous, especially in times of national emergency where you need unity of action. And then there's an argument with respect to democratic accountability. If you have a single executive that is responsible for all of the actions of the executive branch, there's more accountability because that person can be blamed and held responsible and voted out of office at the next election. So those are some of the reasons why one would want a unitary executive as opposed to an executive in which certain agencies, positions, officials within that branch are protected from this kind of removal power. The case against the unitary executive is similarly multi-part. I'm not going to take a position on the originalist argument. There was a decision of 1789 led by James Madison that many legal scholars point to as justifying the plenary interpretation of a president's power. This is a complex legal argument. I would only say that not every legal scholar believes that there was that this is the appropriate interpretation of that debate, and there's also a debate over originalism itself, whether we ought to be bound by our research into the true intentions of, the founding fathers. I think that there's a bunch of other justifications for limiting the president's power to simply fire whoever he wants. The Congress has, in fact, been inserting itself into executive branch personnel policy for 150 years. This really begins with the Pendleton Act of 1883, which established the U.S. Civil Service Commission and began to require examinations for entry into the civil service. Prior to the Pendleton Act, you had the spoils system or the patronage system for much of the 19th century, in which really every federal official was there as a result of a payoff to some politician. This led to a tremendous amount of corruption and also incompetence in the federal bureaucracy, because there really were not any strong requirements for expertise, education, skill, background, and so forth. The other thing that Congress did was to create multi-member commissions, like the first regulatory commission, the Interstate Commerce Commission, or ICC. But there's an alphabet soup of other multi-member commissions, including the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the SEC, the MSPB, and many others. There, the argument is a little bit different. All of these commissions, by statute, are supposed to have boards that are balanced in partisan terms between the two parties. The commissioners serve for fixed terms that are staggered, and what that means is that the commission positions and the policies they recommend don't change as rapidly with every election as is the case of a commission or an agency headed by a single head of agency. In that case, the president appoints a new head of agency, and then the policy can change right away after the new president is inaugurated. The multi-member commissions delay that shift in policy because of the staggered terms of the commission members. I would say that both the requirements for a merit-based bureaucracy and these multi-member commissions had a common origin. Congress wanted to protect expertise. They wanted to make sure that certain positions within the bureaucracy were staffed by people that actually had the qualifications and were not simply political friends of the president. And many of these measures really had the objective of depoliticizing the bureaucracy and also protecting it from the kind of corruption that you saw during the period of the patronage system or the spoils system. So in the United States, we basically have a separation of powers where Article 1 empowers Congress to make laws and statutes. Article 2 directs the president to be the executor of those laws. But in certain ways, powers have also been separated within the executive branch. So when you have a position that is protected like the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's a way of protecting expertise. And traditionally in that bureau, the people working in it are professional statisticians, and the head of it is somebody that has a reputation for being able to do labor surveys, that knows, how to conduct empirical research into employment, inflation, and things of that sort. And for that reason, the head of that agency was given these for-cause protections to prevent some political hack from replacing somebody that had genuine expertise. This is something that I've come to conclude is really important in all organizations. You have a theory called principal agent theory that is very popular among economists that says in a hierarchical organization, you've got a principal at the top of the organization, and then you've got a cascading series of agents that have to carry out the wishes of the principal, and organizational dysfunction happens when the agents have their own agendas and don't follow the mandates of the principal. The problem with this theory is that in real-world circumstances, authority travels in the opposite direction. It often goes from the agents back to the principal, and the reason for this is that oftentimes the agents, the low-level frontline bureaucrats, have more expertise, knowledge, and connection to local events. They're able to act more quickly than a principal that is several layers up in the bureaucracy, is really disconnected with what's actually happening, and doesn't really have the background or expertise to make good decisions. And in a sense, I think these congressional intrusions into the plenary authority of the executive are meant to protect those lower level agents and to say you can't simply get rid of them because you don't like them or they disagree with you or they don't give you the results that you immediately want. These are positions that the government needs to operate effectively, and that's the reason that you have these congressionally mandated rules about who you can hire and especially who you can fire. I think that the Supreme Court has pretty much indicated that it's going to make a decision on a precedent called Humphrey's Executor. This was a 1935 Supreme Court decision that said that it was constitutional for Congress to make these kinds of rules about hiring and firing. It's been a target of conservative advocates of the unitary executive for many years, and I think it's likely that the decision will be made by the end of the year. The rubber really hits the road in the question of the Federal Reserve. That's really the case where it's most clear that expertise is needed. The financial markets certainly think that the independence of the Federal Reserve is very critical. You don't want some political hack deciding arbitrarily on what interest rates should be. You want that to be the result of deliberations on the part of professional economists, people with vast experience in financial markets. And those are the types of people that have typically made up the commissioners of the Federal Reserve Board members and the staff of the Federal Reserve. And that is really what's being challenged by Donald Trump, who's asserted his right to get rid of Jerome Powell and individual members of the Federal Reserve. This is all going to come to a head in the next few months, and I think it bears watching. If the Supreme Court really makes the unitary executive the law of the land by overturning Humphrey's Executor, they obviously have a right to do this, but I think that this is going to be a big setback for the quality of government in the United States. So thank you for listening. If you thought that this discussion is helpful, please subscribe to my Frankly Fukuyama video log. You can also see versions of this in my blog, my Frankly Fukuyama blog on American Purpose and the Persuasion online magazine. I'll provide links to these in the description below. Thanks a lot for listening.